Welcome to this edition of the STARS webinar. I am Tony Schönenberger. I'm the Executive Chairman of STARS. Today, we have the great privilege to talk to Philippe JOST. Philippe, welcome. It's great to have you on this webinar.
Thank you, Tony.
Philippe joined Sika in 1997. He held various management positions in the United States and in Switzerland. He was responsible for the concrete business at Sika. In addition to that, or later on, he was corporate head human resources. And now Philippe is head construction and member of the group management. Philippe is a Luxembourg national. And last but not least, Philippe is a STARS alumnus. Yeah. I should also mention that Sika is a partner of STARS. We have now 30 minutes of Q&A. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature below and type in your questions. And again, I encourage all of you to do it as quickly as possible because we have only 30 minutes. Now, let's start the discussion. Philippe, obviously, and we all know, Sika is a world leader in the specialty chemicals industry. Could you please describe in a nutshell, your company?
Okay, thank you, Tony, and many thanks for the introduction. I still remember, even if it's, you see the gray hair here, being a STAR alumni is many, many years ago, but I still have very good memories of the days I spent in Stein am Rhein. So glad to be back. And I have to be careful what I say because I saw that 3 of my Sika colleagues are listening, so I'm sure they will correct me if needed. But as you said, you know, Sika is a construction chemical company, but we also have chemicals for the industrial manufacturing process. And what we mean with chemicals, these are not base chemicals that you know, large multinational chemical companies produce, but it's really the next step in the production process where these are adapted to the needs of the construction industry or otherwise car manufacturers, bus manufacturers, etc. And these are adhesives, sealants, they're waterproofing products, roofing membranes, cementitious tile adhesives, repair mortars, admixtures that go into concrete or cement, and also solutions for industrial flooring. Our sales are about 50% sold direct to the user of those products, and the other 50% go to distribution. And when we talk about distribution, part of it is the professional retail channel, but then also we have part of it that goes through retail and ends up in DIY usage. So if you go to Home Depot in the US, you go to Bauhaus in Germany or in Switzerland, you can pick up our products for, you know, fixing your bathroom or the kitchen or whatever you're working on. And this part is the part that's growing. Also, we've invested in our e-commerce activities, and we see also with Corona and lockdown, more and more of our products being sold through that channel. Overall, we're present in over 100 countries with 27,000 employees, and we operate more than 300 plants globally where our products are manufactured and generated about 9.3 billion Swiss francs last year. We listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange, part of the SMI. Now, this all sounds like a very large company, but at the same time, you know, we realize that our legal entities in the countries, they range from the US being the largest to many, many, many small ones. And we really want to make sure that we stay in, at least in our spirit, we stay a small company, an entrepreneurial driven company where decisions are made locally, because I think building standards are very, very different country by country, and you know, developing a solution that may be successful in Western Europe. If you go to the countries in Africa, if you go to India, you go to China, you may not be successful. So it's important to us that we leave a lot of decision-making power in our subsidiaries that know the markets, know our customers. So in a sense, we also operate within this company, we operate with 100 subsidiaries that we ask to be entrepreneurial and agile to fulfill our customer needs.
Great, thank you very much for this description. What are the 3 biggest challenges for you as a company?
I think I think one of the challenges is that as we grow, to keep this entrepreneurial spirit that I just referred to in the question before, I think the risk is that processes become overwhelming, that following systems that are decided centrally, they limit the ability of our local companies and paralyze or slow down development and innovation. So having this growing and the responsibilities of a large company, we have to be aware of and have to make sure that we own up to that. But having this balance that we still empower our employees and find solutions for our local customer, I think that's, from a cultural perspective, is probably the challenge that we're working with the most. We've also, what used to be called the Sika spirit is now codified. What we expect from our leaders in the organization. This wasn't the case. We also always talked about the Sika spirit, but if you're a company of a few thousand employees, it may be easy to convey that. If you're 27,000, you need to have an explanation for what you mean with that. I think that's one of our challenges. I think the other challenge, and that's certainly not unique for us, I feel, that maybe the first 10 or 15 years I worked for this company, you always had some time in the year or some years where things were slower, and I feel really like the last few years, this has no longer been the case. You have so many both internal and external challenges. We made a large acquisition 3 years ago with Parex, and we felt that, okay, now that's done, now it's becoming easier. Then we got hit by Corona, then the raw material crisis hit, then now you have a war happening in the middle of Europe, and I think at least maybe it's also in my role being promoted over time that these challenges become basically constantly. You don't have a year or two where you say, okay, now everything's set, and that, I think that requires extreme commitment from all of our employees, and the resilience to deal with those crises is extremely important. And then the third challenge, I guess, from a strategic point of view, I mentioned the growth of the company, and we are, if you look at the way we organized, I mentioned some of the products early on, but internally we organize in 8 target markets and 100 countries. So that's 800 markets that we're present. And in some we are market leader, in some we are a follower, in some we have barely any presence in the market share. And so making sure that while being one of the global leaders in this industry, we still have different paces at which and different strategies, essentially having 800 different action plans that may require different skills to succeed. I think that's the third challenge that I would mention.
Great. I mean, you mentioned the acquisitions, and obviously we all are following Sika and observing the success of Sika. And it's really a success story if I think of the successful integration of so many acquisitions. Looking back at the last 20 years, probably 5 or 6 acquisitions per year. Some of them are very small, but then the really big ones, you mentioned Parex, you mentioned MBCC. What is the secret of your success? How you integrate successfully these companies into your company?
I think there's 2 points. Maybe I go a step back and why do we make acquisitions? I think that when we define the size of the market in the areas that we're active, this is a market that is over 100 billion in globally, and even with our 9 billion being one of the largest players in this industry, we still don't have 10% market share. If you add up the top 20 players, you still don't get to 50% market share. So it's a highly fragmented market that is, however, started to consolidate more. If you look back maybe 10 years or 15 years, the market was even further consolidated. So, and Sika wants to play a role in this consolidation. So we want to be part of this industry and be a leader in this consolidation process. But we don't do acquisitions to cut costs or to eliminate competitors. We use the acquisitions as a growth platform. And And you mentioned, we do small acquisitions. We've started to do a few bigger ones 3 years ago. And I think we learned over the years what to do and what not to do in those processes, and we have a game plan on how we integrate that, whether it comes legal entity merger, optimize product portfolios, integrate brands, keep the talent of those organizations. I think we when we acquire companies, as I said, we want it to be a growth platform, and there's 2 types of acquisitions that we do. One is, I mentioned those 8 target markets in 100 countries. I think that often we do an acquisition because our competitors and these companies are only active local or in 1 or 2 countries to strengthen us, and they are often stronger than we are, and that means that they're also did some things better than we did. So often we learn from them, they learn from us, and then we try to take that learning, what they've done better in that market, and then we can multiply that by rolling this learning out to more markets that are similar and where this learning can be helpful. And especially in Parex, if it's bigger companies that have been successful, in the case of Parex, it was 24 different countries, then it is a robust strategy that we can use to, and we, for example, for Parex, we created this 8 target markets, building, finishing, and this has grown to become our largest target market now on the construction side. So it's really multiplying this effect, showing other countries where Parex was not present, introducing these products there, introducing the successful way to market strategy there, and being able to replicate that and be successful in these areas.
How important would you say is then your corporate culture?
It's a good question. I think our corporate culture, in the sense that we leave people to be entrepreneur and be successful, resonates well when we acquire companies, because often they're smaller, they have this entrepreneurial spirit, and we don't dictate them. Well, of course, there are certain rules that change. They're part of a publicly traded companies, so there are certainly manual of authority steps, how you convey information to the public, etc. That changes, but we try to keep their the basis of their success, that their entrepreneurial energy. Maybe it's limited somewhat, and decision making gets not quite as fast as it used to be when you're a small company operating in one country and only having 20 million sales. But at the same time, many of the people that join us, they leave. If you look at our senior management, I think we have about 20 to 25% of senior managers have joined Sika through acquisition. So we keep that talent, we keep that know-how within our company, and we don't pretend that we know everything. And I think that, so we're willing to learn from them, and they appreciate that and stay.
Okay, there is a question from the audience from Andreas Dobler. He's from Hilti.
Yep.
There is Corona, raw material crisis, Ukraine. How do you overcome all these challenges?
Look, I don't have the secret. I think everybody is suffering from this, and so are we. I think we have products that we cannot ship, due to supply chain issues, due to raw materials that are not available. So overcoming is maybe a big word, because we're suffering from that as well as everybody else in the industry. I think one of the secrets that I feel that we've in the setup that we have, and we've seen that not necessarily our competitors, but we've seen it in other players in the market, that the decentralized decision making is extremely important, because you remain agile, you remain fast. If every decision is done centrally, and I've seen companies that have a very strong headquarter functions, they were, just decisions were made in the US, that everybody has to go back, has to stay in the office because that was the culture, and Europe has a shutdown. And then while everybody goes back to the office, the US in the middle and has shutdown. And then, so you cannot try to control or steer that centrally. So you can give guidance, you can give recommendation, you can tell them how important it is that to take care of the safety and the health of our employees. But in the end, there's so many local differences on which rules and regulations are in place, then that you cannot make that centrally. I think the decentralized decision making of our company has helped us to navigate through those crises maybe a little bit better than others, but I think overcoming is a big word. And I think the way we're doing this here now is something that we learned as well during the crisis. So we used to travel to countries to make action plans and then go back maybe 6 months later. I still believe that when it comes to creativity or workshops where you say, how do we address this problem or not, you have to be in the same room. You have to come. This is brainstorming. This is building upon each other. It's very difficult to do that. But if you have a follow-up and you define an action item, I don't have to fly back to the US. I schedule a 1-hour Teams meeting or a Zoom call with them, and we said, look, we agreed where you're standing, where you're having hurdles. So adjusting that. So this can become very powerful in combining the way we used to do it, what we learned during the crisis. And I think we'll never go back where we've been, but I would also not want to stay in an environment that's 100% digital, because you learn from people, you learn from each other, and I would hate, and people are important in our company. And if you value everybody's input as an entrepreneur, you cannot do this, by sending out emails and having web calls only.
Looking at China, and some of your companies are pretty strong in China. I believe it is Parex, for instance, and Sika itself, of course. Yep. If you look at the competition of these political systems, it looks like as if in the end, Sika and all the other companies, obviously too, have to set up a Sika China and a Sika Global. Is that something you are thinking of? Are you planning for?
Look, I think, if I compare again our company with elevator companies or with other manufacturing industries that have truly a global supply chain, we are very different. Most of our products they don't travel well. So we don't have huge interdependencies. Some products are manufactured on a regional level, some may be on an area level, but we have very few products that are truly manufactured for global use. And I think in that sense, this helps us. That means, China is to an extremely large extent self-sufficient. The products produced in China for China, the products that are produced in Japan for Japan, and then there is some exports between Europe and Asia, and between Europe and North America, and the other way around. But I think we have an over 90% self-sufficiency in the regions. And that's, for example, with other players in the industry, in the construction industry that may have 5 manufacturing hubs globally, and if their Chinese manufacturing plant cannot work because of a lockdown, if in Shanghai, this disrupts their own. And for us, this disrupts not even China, because in China we have more than 10 plants producing those products because of the size of the country. And okay, if there's a lockdown in Shanghai, our Shanghai plant doesn't operate, but so and at the same time there is no demand in the market because all the contractors that would use our products cannot operate either. So I think in that sense, we already have a supply chain in place that doesn't, for the raw materials, it's an entirely different ballpark, because we do get, of the base chemicals, they have a more global nature on the supply chain, and there we suffer more than in our production to then customers. So.
I think we should turn to some key technology trends. And actually, I have a first question again from Hilti.
Yep.
Hilti is obviously watching Sika.
Yeah. We're watching them.
Okay. It's Martin Lang asking the following question. What role plays the digital lab, artificial intelligence, in your research today? Can you develop new technologies faster and more flexibly in an always faster changing environment?
Well, this is, I think, a key question that again, I'm not pretending that we have a solution, but that we're looking at very closely. I think for us, digitalization, if you look at banking, or if you look at media, this digitalization happened 10 or 15 years ago, and the world has changed for those industries. In construction, I think we were lucky that it didn't happen so early on, and that we could observe what worked and what didn't work in other industries and profit from that. But I think it's happening now, and I think we're looking at digitalization in many different aspects. One is how we interact with our customers. I mentioned e-commerce, but it's also how to use our products. Nobody reads a manual anymore. Everybody looks at YouTube video. So we have customers placing orders on WhatsApp and replying to posts in Instagram. Say, where can I buy this product? And so the way we interact with our customers has to change and is changing, and that's certainly a big emphasis on us. The other part is really indoors. How do we create people that are more effective? And having Teams or Zoom calls is probably the least of that. But having the information that of 27 employees, we always say if Sika knew what Sika knows, we would be much more efficient. And I think artificial intelligence, the right systems to access the documents that are needed to be successful, to play with artificial intelligence, but also have data lakes where all the data of our products are stored. All the test results of our thousands of products that we have are accessed, and not only the ones we launched, but also the ones we tested and didn't launch. We're trying to improve that constantly using digital tools and also experimenting with artificial intelligence. But I don't think we don't have the solution. I think this is work that has started here, that we're seeing first results, but it will take us another decade to. And by then there will be new systems. But I think it's definitely one of the areas where if we don't, digital construction is at ETH there's a doctoral thesis about buying a 7-day house between ordering and the house being done. So you have automated processes, standardized elements that are being used, and so the world is pushing us in that direction. And if we only work with the small contractors that will fix tiles the same way now that they did 20 years ago, and in 20 years, that's not where the industry is heading.
In this context, maybe we should look at sustainability. Obviously, your industry, the building sector in general, is responsible for quite a lot of CO2 emissions. Right. What about your net zero strategy? If you have any, can you explain it a little bit to us?
Well, we've been having CO2 emissions targets as part of our strategy since we launched our current strategy in 2018. Our group management, as well as our senior managers, have a personal target in reducing CO2. We have hit that target the last 3 years. So for us, it's a key part of everything we do. Now, I have to say that the majority of our emissions are not scope 1 and 2. So, this is a terminology that everybody should be familiar with, but maybe not everyone is. Scope 1 and 2 emissions are the emissions that we have ourselves. So if we, probably one of the higher emissions comes if we get sand for our mortars and we have to dry it. That's where we burn fossil fuels to dry that sand. But then those emissions only account for a small part. The largest part of our emissions are scope 3, and these are CO2 emissions that are embedded in the products that we procure. So if we buy cement, if we buy chemicals, in that manufacturing process, CO2 emissions were done, and we kind of down the value chain, we inherit those emissions with the products that we buy. And so the lever of what we can do ourselves, even though I said we have that target to reduce our own emissions since 3 years as personal targets, and it has led to real results. In drying the sand that I mentioned, if you let the sand dry in the air to hit a certain percentage before you put it in the dryer, you achieve, you can dry the sand to the level you need it with half the energy. And these are things that if nobody had them in their targets, it's not a huge cost, the additional fuel that you need. Nobody will look at that. But the moment you put it in people's targets, they realize, and this spreads then throughout the company, and here we cut emissions by 10%. And we have many such initiatives that, because nobody was measured on them, things didn't happen. And the day we started to measure them, these initiatives were happening throughout the company and shared and implemented in other places. But at the same time, when I mentioned those scope 3 emissions, we see ourselves as an enabler. So if we are able to help our customers reduce emissions by reducing chemicals or cement in our materials, by launching products that helps them reduce cement or increase durability. If you have to fix your roof every 10 years instead of every 20 or 30 years, this has also an impact on the overall emissions. So we see ourselves as a key player in this industry in helping to reduce emissions, but some of it is internal, some of it is through the formulations we have and the scope 3 that we inherited, and some of it is helping our customers to also reduce their emissions.
There's a follow-up question again by Martin Lang from Hilti on sustainability. He asks, are your customers willing to pay higher prices or accept performance trade-offs for more sustainable products? Or does sustainability rather have to be enforced by regulations?
Look, I think both. I think the majority of customers today are not willing to pay for this. We see some high-profile projects of museums or philanthropists that say, look, I want to reach platinum level in LEED, and your product will help us, and I only buy a cradle-to-cradle roofing membrane, and we have that in our portfolio, and that's the winning argument, and price and performance would drop to number 2 or 3 arguments. We see a very, very small group of customers that are ranking sustainability higher than the other 2 that I just mentioned. But we see more and more is that sustainability is becoming one of the decision criteria, and especially driven by large contractors or large owners that are also publicly traded companies, because the pressure is coming from their investors. Of course, the small entrepreneur or contractor that has 2 or 3 employees and runs his business out of a pickup van, until they have a change and they don't look at only price and a certain performance, I think that will take many, many years. So and I think the regulator has to play a role. We cannot just, but it's, I would be cautious to leave everything to the regulator. I think as a company we have a role in this, and we try to do our best while being conscious that maybe same as in the past, we positioned 2 products, one with higher performance, one with lower performance. Here now we have to position a 3rd product which is differentiates on its sustainability aspects vis-a-vis the 2 others, and we have launched such products, and overall they have been very successful when we launched them.
There's a delicate question, Philippe, from Lukas Studer from Bergin. A couple of years ago, your former CEO joined Holcim.
Yeah.
From a distance, it looks like a huge player is entering your market through acquisitions. How is it seen at Sika?
Look, I cannot comment on what Holcim's strategy is, and I know Jan personally. I used to work with him, for him, I cannot comment too much on what his thoughts are, because I can't look into his head. But I certainly think that this is, in my opinion, is cyclical. Lafarge used to own Chryso, used to own Parex, used to own a gypsum division, used to own a roof tile division. Heidelberg Cement had a mortar division and an admixture division. At some point, they decided that this was not where the future was, and they divested that. Now some of those players are re-entering this market. This is a strategic outlook, and it's not new. It's something, in my opinion, that's cyclical, where these players decide that they need to be a broader player in the construction industry versus a narrow player. And over the years, we acquired some. I mentioned Parex. We acquired Axim from Italcementi in 2011. So there may be a time in 20 years when when Holcim feels they should focus on their core business again. I don't know. I really don't. But I see this not as something completely new. I see this as at least, when you're in the industry for 20 plus years like myself, it's a little bit of deja vu.
Okay, I have two final questions.
Sure.
Looking into the next 3 to 5 years, what major trends are you expecting in your industry?
Well, I think we mentioned digitalization. I don't think that this is something that I need to go into more, but I think that's really going to hit the construction industry. You also mentioned sustainability. I think that's also something that not only the construction industry is facing, but many other industries. So I think those are at least the big ones that I see that we discussed around. And then the other part is really more, I think it's the changing of the world population. It's going to be growing in Africa and Asia. You're going to have mega cities, people moving to the cities. You're going to have displacement also due to climate change. So I think you have an aging of the population. So I think where our markets will be and what these markets are expecting from us is already changing, and we cannot, none of us can have a purely European focus, as the markets will be with mega cities in Africa and Asia. And I think that's something that as a European-based company, we have to be aware of and we have to be ready for. Otherwise, we will be left with the smallest part of the market.
Final question, Philippe. What advice would you give to the audience to drive change?
Look, I think it starts with the people you hire, and I'm gonna talk about something that I learned from Satya Nadella. I had the luck to be, or the privilege to be at a fireside chat where he talked how he changed Microsoft, and he recommended a book that I would recommend everybody to read as well. It's called Mindset, written by Carol Dweck, and Satya Nadella's wife made him read a book for the education of their children. And he said, look, this is perfect for how I want to change the company culture. And essentially what it says is that there's two types of people in the world. They're the ones that he calls the know-it-alls. They've studied at good universities and enter the workforce knowing that they know everything and this will never change. And then you have the ones that come into the workforce and are willing to learn at every moment of their career, are agile and willing to learn. And in this book, Mindset by Carol Dweck, it goes about educating and having a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. And I think if you surround yourself with people with a growth mindset that are willing to change and adapt, then you and if you surround your people with that think they know it all and there's nothing that they can learn on top of that, and everybody who does it differently than them doesn't know anything, then change is extremely difficult. And I think that for me would be the main recommendation on how to drive change, is have the right people in the boat that see a need for change and have a mindset that's open to change.
Right. Thank you very much, Philippe. Time is up.
Okay.
First of all, I want to thank you very much for your brilliant insights. We all learned a lot from you, a lot about the success story of Sika, and I'm particularly impressed by the corporate culture and how you integrate all these many acquisitions. So I wish you and your company all the best, and we very much look forward to having a STARS Switzerland alumni chapter at Sika in the second half of this year. In 2 weeks from now, we are starting a new webinar series called Staying in Dialogue with China. Nicolas Chapuis, the EU ambassador in Beijing, will be the first speaker. He will speak on EU and China relations in challenging times. I hope to see you there. In the meantime, all the best. Goodbye. Take care. Thank you.